She saved his mother's life without knowing who she was. He hired her without revealing his identity. When the truth finally came out, their world turned upside down. But there was one more secret that would change everything forever. What happens when destiny plays the ultimate game of hide and seek? Grab your tissues and find out as we dive into this incredible story of love, deception, and second chances. This is the story of Kwame Asante, a 28-year-old fashion mogul in Accra, Ghana. His family owned the biggest textile empire in West Africa, Asante Fashion House. They made the most beautiful kente cloth, modern African prints, and luxury fashion that celebrities wore across the continent. Kwame had everything: money, power, and respect. But his heart was locked away, frozen since 7 years ago. Every morning, Kwame sat in his corner office overlooking the bustling streets of Accra. The sounds of trotros honking, street vendors calling out their wares, and high-life music drifting from nearby shops filled the air. But inside his glass tower, everything was silent. Too silent. He stared at his computer screen, reviewing quarterly reports. Millions of cedis in profit, hundreds of employees, stores across Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. Yet he felt empty inside. His secretary knocked on the door. "Sir, your mother is here to see you." Kwame's jaw tightened. He knew what this was about. Mama Akosua Asante walked in wearing a stunning gold and burgundy kente dress that shimmered in the morning light. At 55, she was still elegant, still commanding. Her graying hair was wrapped in a beautiful head wrap, and her gold jewelry caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Mama Akosua Asante walked in wearing a stunning gold and burgundy kente dress that shimmered in the morning light. At 55, she was still elegant, still commanding. Her graying hair was wrapped in a beautiful head wrap, and her gold jewelry caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. "Kwame, my son," she said in Twi, then switched to English. "We need to talk." Kwame didn't look up from his computer. "Good morning, Mama. If this is about marriage again—" "It is," she interrupted firmly. "You are 28 years old. When will you give me grandchildren? When will you bring a good woman into this family?" Kwame finally looked at his mother. His eyes were tired, distant. "Mama, I've told you before, I'm focused on the business. Marriage is not important to me." Mama Akosua slammed her hand on the desk. "Not important? Family is everything, Kwame. Your father built this empire to pass down to his children and grandchildren. What's the point of all this wealth if you have no one to share it with?" Kwame stood up and walked to the window. Down below, he could see the Makola market in the distance, bustling with life. Mothers carrying babies on their backs while they sold fabrics. Young couples holding hands as they walked through the streets. He used to dream of that life before she left. Kwame stood up and walked to the window. Down below, he could see the Makola market in the distance, bustling with life. Mothers carrying babies on their backs while they sold fabrics. Young couples holding hands as they walked through the streets. He used to dream of that life before she left. "I tried love once, Mama," he said quietly. "It didn't work out." Mama Akosua's expression softened. She walked over to her son and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That was 7 years ago, my son. You were just children then. It's time to let your heart heal." But Kwame shook his head. "Some wounds don't heal, Mama. Some people are meant to be alone." Mama Akosua sighed deeply. She had watched her son build walls around his heart for 7 years. Ever since Ama left without a word, without explanation. She had loved that girl like her own daughter, and when she disappeared, it broke not just Kwame's heart, but hers too. "I have dinner arrangements with the Mensa family tomorrow," Mama Akosua said firmly. "Their daughter Efua is beautiful, educated, and from a good family. You will join us." "Mama, no." "Yes, Kwame. As your mother, I'm telling you. It's time." After his mother left, Kwame sat alone in his office. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It was of him and a young woman at their senior high school graduation. She was wearing a bright yellow dress with traditional Adinkra symbols printed on it. Her smile was radiant, her dark skin glowing in the afternoon sun. Her name was written on the back in his handwriting. "Ama Ose, my everything." He had kept this photo for 7 years, even though it brought him nothing but pain. even though she had left him without explanation the day after they graduated, even though she had promised to love him forever, then vanished like morning mist. Kwame touched the photo gently, then closed the drawer. Some promises are meant to be broken, he whispered to himself. But across town, in a small apartment in Nima, a young woman was preparing for the biggest interview of her life. Her name was Ama Ose, though she now went by her middle name, Adwoa. She had returned to Ghana just 3 months ago after 7 years in London, studying fashion design and working small jobs to survive. Adwoa sat at her small wooden table, carefully arranging her portfolio. Her designs were a beautiful fusion of traditional African prints with modern silhouettes. Kente-inspired evening gowns, Ankara power suits for professional women, and casual wear that celebrated African heritage while appealing to international markets. Her small room was simple but clean. A single bed, a wooden wardrobe, and walls covered with her sketches and fabric samples. Through her window, she could hear the call to prayer from the nearby mosque, mixing with gospel music from the church down the street. This was the Ghana she remembered, diverse, vibrant, alive. Tomorrow, she would interview at Asante Fashion House, the biggest textile company in West Africa. Her design school professor in London had recommended her personally. "They're looking for fresh talent," he had said, "someone who understands both traditional African aesthetics and global fashion trends. You're perfect for this." But Adwoa had no idea that applying to Asante Fashion House meant walking back into the life of the boy she had loved and lost 7 years ago. The boy she still dreamed about every night. The boy whose heart she had broken when she left Ghana to chase her dreams in London. She picked up a photo from her bedside table. It was the same graduation photo Kwame kept in his desk, but this copy was worn from being carried in her wallet for 7 years. Kwame looked so handsome in his white shirt and black tie, both of them grinning at the camera like they had the whole world ahead of them. "I wonder what you're doing now," she whispered to the photo. "I wonder if you ever forgave me for leaving." The truth was, Adwoa had left Ghana because Kwame's father had given her an ultimatum. "My son has a bright future ahead of him," Papa Kwaku Asante had told her the night before graduation. "He's going to take over the family business, marry someone from a good family, and build an empire. You're a poor girl from Nima. You'll only hold him back." He had offered her money, enough to study abroad and build her own life. "Take this opportunity," he had said. "If you truly love my son, you'll let him go." Young and scared, Adwoa had taken the money and left Ghana the next morning. She never told Kwame about his father's ultimatum. She just disappeared, thinking it was better to break his heart quickly than to hold him back from his destiny. But now, 7 years later, she was back. Not as the poor girl from Nima, but as a talented designer ready to make her mark on the world. She had no idea that fate was about to bring her face to face with the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. 3 days later, Mama Akosua was driving through the heavy traffic of Accra, heading to her sister's house in East Legon. She had just left another unsuccessful dinner arrangement. The Mensah family's daughter was lovely, but Kwame had barely spoken 2 words to her all evening. 3 days later, Mama Akosua was driving through the heavy traffic of Accra, heading to her sister's house in East Legon. She had just left another unsuccessful dinner arrangement. The Mensah family's daughter was lovely, but Kwame had barely spoken 2 words to her all evening. "That stubborn boy," she muttered to herself as she navigated through the crowded intersection near the Accra Mall. "He can't stay locked in the past forever." The rainy season had started early this year, and dark clouds were gathering overhead. The first drops of rain began to splatter on her windshield as she approached the busy Circle intersection. She was thinking about calling her sister to warn her about the traffic when it happened. A commercial bus, painted in bright colors with "God is Love" written across the front, ran a red light at full speed. The driver was looking at his phone, not paying attention to the road. Mama Akosua saw the bus at the last second. She swerved hard to the right, but it was too late. The impact sent her silver Mercedes spinning across the wet intersection. Metal crushed against metal with a horrifying sound that made nearby pedestrians scream and run for cover. The car came to rest against a palm tree. Steam rose from the crumpled hood, and the windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks. Mama Akosua was thrown from the vehicle and lay unconscious on the wet pavement. blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. People began to gather around the accident, pointing and talking loudly in various local languages. Some took photos with their phones, others called for help, but everyone seemed afraid to get too close to the injured woman. That's when Adwoa appeared. She had been walking back from a fabric shop in Osu, her arms full of samples for tomorrow's interview, when she heard the crash. Without thinking, she dropped everything and ran toward the accident scene. She had been walking back from a fabric shop in Osu, her arms full of samples for tomorrow's interview, when she heard the crash. Without thinking, she dropped everything and ran toward the accident scene. "Someone call an ambulance," she shouted in English, then repeated it in Twi. "Obia Begai ambulance." While others stood back and watched, Adwoa got down on her knees beside the injured woman on the pavement. She could see an elegantly dressed woman with blood dripping from her head. "Ma'am," Adwoa called out gently, "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open slowly. She looked confused and scared. "Don't move," Adwoa said calmly. "I'm going to help you, but you need to stay very still." "What's your name?" "Akosua," the woman whispered weakly. "Akosua Asante." Adwoa's heart stopped for a moment. Asante. That was Kwame's family name, but Ghana was full of Asantes. It was one of the most common surnames. It had to be a coincidence. "Mrs. Asante, I'm Adwoa. The ambulance is coming, but I'm going to stay with you until they arrive, okay?" Mama Akosua nodded slightly. Something about this young woman's voice was soothing, familiar even. Adwoa carefully took Mama Akosua's hand. "Can you feel my hand, Mrs. Asante?" "Yes," she whispered. "Good, that's very good. Now I want you to talk to me. Tell me about your family. It will help keep you awake." I have a son," Mama Akosua said slowly. "His name is Kwame. He's a good boy, but he's so stubborn. Won't get married. Won't give me grandchildren." Adwoa's blood turned cold. Kwame Asante. It couldn't be. But as she looked more closely at the woman's face, even injured and bleeding, she began to see the resemblance. The same strong cheekbones. The same determined eyes. This was Kwame's mother. "Tell me more about Kwame," Adwoa said, trying to keep her voice steady while her heart pounded. "He's brilliant," Mama Akosua continued, her voice getting stronger. "Runs our family business. But 7 years ago, this girl broke his heart. He's never been the same since. I just want him to be happy again." Tears filled Adwoa's eyes, but she blinked them away. She had to focus on helping this woman, not on the guilt that was crushing her chest. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later, sirens wailing as it pushed through the crowded intersection. The paramedics worked quickly to get Mama Akosua onto a stretcher. "I want to go with her to the hospital," Adwoa told the paramedic. "Are you family?" he asked. Adwoa hesitated. "I'm the one who found her. Please, I want to make sure she's okay." The paramedic nodded and helped her into the ambulance. As they rushed through Accra traffic toward Ridge Hospital, Mama Akosua squeezed Adwoa's hand weakly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." Adwoa squeezed back, not trusting herself to speak. She had just saved the life of her ex-boyfriend's mother. The mother who probably hated her for breaking her son's heart. The mother who had no idea who she really was. At the hospital, doctors determined that Mama Akosua had a mild concussion, 3 broken ribs, and various cuts and bruises, but no life-threatening injuries. She would need to stay for observation for a few days. Adwoa waited in the hospital corridor, pacing back and forth on the polished concrete floors. The familiar smell of disinfectant and the sound of nurses speaking in hushed Twi brought back memories of visiting her sick grandmother years ago. When the doctor came out, he spoke to her as if she were family. "She's going to be fine," he said in English with a thick Ghanaian accent. "Very lucky woman. A few more minutes in that car and the outcome could have been very different." "Can I see her?" Adwoa asked. "Yes, but only for a few minutes. She needs rest." Mama Akosua was lying in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in white bandages, her elegant kente dress replaced with a plain hospital gown. But her eyes were alert and focused when Adwoa entered the room. "You're still here," she said with surprise. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," Adwoa replied, taking a seat in the plastic chair beside the bed. "What's your full name, my dear?" Mama Akosua asked. "Adwoa Mensah," she lied, using her mother's maiden name. She couldn't bear to say Ose. Kwame might recognize it. Adwoa, you saved my life today. If you hadn't stayed with me, talked to me, kept me awake, the doctor said I could have gone into shock. Anyone would have done the same thing. Mama Akosua shook her head slowly. No, not anyone. Most people just stood there and watched. But you acted. You cared about a stranger. Over the next 3 days, while Mama Akosua recovered, Adwoa visited every evening after work. She brought homemade palm nut soup from a local chop bar, fresh flowers from the market, and stories that made the older woman laugh. They talked about everything. Life in Accra, fashion. Adwoa was careful not to mention her interview, family traditions, and dreams for the future. Mama Akosua was charmed by this young woman's intelligence, kindness, and humble spirit. You know, Mama Akosua said on the second evening, you remind me of someone I used to know. A young girl who was very important to my family once. Adwoa's heart skipped a beat. Really? Yes. She was like a daughter to me. But she left Ghana many years ago. I still wonder what happened to her. On Mama Akosua's last night in the hospital, she took Adwoa's hands in her own. Her grip was strong despite her injuries. Adwoa, I want to tell you something. I believe God sent you to save me for a reason. You're exactly the kind of young woman I've been praying for. What do you mean? My son, Kwame. He's 28 years old, successful, handsome, but he won't settle down. His heart was broken years ago, and he's built walls around himself ever since. He needs someone like you. Someone kind, genuine, caring. Adwoa tried to pull her hands away, but Mama Akosua held on tight. Promise me you'll meet him. I know you're probably thinking I'm just a grateful old woman talking nonsense, but I have a feeling about this. A mother's intuition. Adwoa looked into those familiar eyes, so much like Kwame's, and felt tears building up. Mrs. Asante, promise me, Mama Akosua insisted. If fate allows it, promise me you'll give him a chance. I promise, Adwoa whispered, thinking it was just the rambling of a grateful patient. She had no idea she had just agreed to meet the boy who still owned her heart. That night, Mama Akosua called her son from her hospital bed. Kwame, I want you to come to dinner this Sunday. There's someone very special I want you to meet. Mama, please, not another arranged meeting. This is different, she said firmly. This young woman saved my life. The least you can do is have one meal with her. Kwame sighed. He was tired of arguing with his mother about marriage, and she had been through a traumatic accident. Fine, Mama, one dinner. Good, her name is Adwoa, and I have a feeling you're going to like her very much. After hanging up, Kwame shook his head. Another dinner, another hopeful young woman, another disappointing evening where he would sit politely while his mother tried to play matchmaker. He had no idea that the woman coming to dinner was the same woman whose photo he still kept in his desk drawer. Monday morning came faster than Adwoa expected. She stood outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Asante Fashion House headquarters, her portfolio clutched tightly in her hands. The building was magnificent, 30 stories of steel and glass reaching toward the bright blue Accra sky, with the company's logo prominently displayed in gold letters. People in expensive suits walked in and out of the building, talking on phones in English, Twi, and other local languages. This was the heart of Ghana's fashion industry, and she was about to walk into it. You can do this, Adwoa, she whispered to herself. You've trained for this moment. Inside the lobby, the decor was stunning. The walls were covered with enlarged photographs of beautiful models wearing Asante fashion designs, flowing kente gowns, modern Ankara suits, and innovative fusion pieces that celebrated African heritage while appealing to international markets. A large fountain in the center of the lobby played traditional Akan music softly. The receptionist, a young woman with intricate braids and a warm smile, directed her to the 25th floor. You're here for the senior designer interview, right? Mr. Asante will see you at 10 a.m. Adwoa's heart stopped. Mr. Asante? Yes, the CEO. He interviews all senior-level candidates personally. You're very lucky. He's extremely selective. In the elevator, Adwoa's mind raced. It had to be Kwame's father conducting the interview. Papa Kwaku Asante, the man who had paid her to leave Ghana 7 years ago. Would he recognize her? Would he remember the poor girl from Nima he had wanted out of his son's life? But when the elevator doors opened on the 25th floor, she was greeted by an HR director who led her to a conference room. "Mr. Asante will be with you shortly," the woman said. "Can I get you some water, coffee, sobolo?" "Water would be nice, thank you." Adwoa sat in the conference room, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Accra. She could see the ocean in the distance, the busy harbour, and the sprawling neighbourhoods where millions of people lived, worked, and dreamed. She opened her portfolio and reviewed her designs one more time. Each piece told a story, her story. The struggles of a young woman trying to balance tradition with modernity, poverty with ambition, love with duty. The door opened, and Adwoa looked up with a professional smile that immediately froze on her face. It wasn't Papa Kwaku Asante who walked in. It was Kwame. 7 years had changed him. He was taller, broader in the shoulders, more confident in his movements. His baby face had matured into strong, masculine features. He wore an expensive tailored suit that fit him perfectly, and his hair was cut in a modern style. But those eyes, those deep, expressive eyes that had haunted her dreams for 7 years, were exactly the same. It was Kwame. 7 years had changed him. He was taller, broader in the shoulders, more confident in his movements. His baby face had matured into strong, masculine features. He wore an expensive tailored suit that fit him perfectly, and his hair was cut in a modern style. But those eyes, those deep, expressive eyes that had haunted her dreams for 7 years, were exactly the same. Kwame stopped dead in the doorway when he saw her. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a loud thud. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. "Ama," he whispered. "Hello, Kwame," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. They stared at each other across the conference room, 7 years of hurt and longing hanging in the air between them. The HR director, unaware of the tension, made introductions. "Miss Mensah, this is Mr. E. Asante, our senior creative director. He'll be conducting your interview today." Adwoa noticed that Kwame didn't correct the woman about his title. He was letting her think he was just a senior employee, not the CEO of the company. "Please have a seat," Kwame said, his voice carefully controlled. He picked up his briefcase and moved to the chair across from her. For the next hour, they conducted the most professional interview of their lives, both pretending they were strangers. Adwoa presented her portfolio with steady hands and a clear voice, explaining her design philosophy and her vision for modern African fashion. Kwame asked intelligent questions about her techniques, her inspiration, and her experience working in London. But underneath the professional facade, their hearts were screaming. Kwame couldn't help but notice how she had grown into her beauty. At 18, she had been pretty. At 26, she was stunning. Success and independence had given her a confidence that radiated from within. Her designs were brilliant, innovative yet respectful of tradition, commercially viable yet artistically inspired. Adwoa watched Kwame's hands as he took notes, remembering how those same hands had once held hers as they walked through the University of Ghana campus, dreaming of their future together. She noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring and wondered if he had ever married. "Your work is impressive," Kwame said finally, closing her portfolio. "Very impressive. We'll be in touch within the week." "Thank you," Adwoa replied, standing to leave. As she reached the door, she turned back. "Kwame?" He looked up, and for just a moment, his professional mask slipped. She could see the pain in his eyes, the questions, the longing. "It's good to see you again," she said softly. After she left, Kwame sat alone in the conference room for a long time. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day," he said. "Sir, you have the board meeting at 2 p.m. Cancel everything." That evening, Kwame sat in his penthouse apartment in Airport residential area, staring out at the lights of Accra spread below him. His home was beautiful, modern furniture, African art, floor-to-ceiling windows, but it felt empty. It had always felt empty. That evening, Kwame sat in his penthouse apartment in Airport residential area, staring out at the lights of Accra spread below him. His home was beautiful, modern furniture, African art, floor-to-ceiling windows, but it felt empty. It had always felt empty. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the faded graduation photo. For 7 years he had wondered what happened to her, why she left, where she went, whether she ever thought about him. Now he knew she was back, and she was more successful and beautiful than he had ever imagined. But the questions remained. Why did she leave? And why had she come back now? His phone rang. It was his mother. "Kwame, don't forget about dinner this Sunday. Adwoa is so excited to meet you." "Mama, about that dinner." "No, no excuses, you promised. This young woman is special, Kwame. I have a feeling she's going to change your life." If only you knew, Kwame thought as he hung up the phone. Wednesday morning, Adwoa's phone rang while she was eating breakfast in her small apartment. "Miss Mensah, this is Jennifer from Asante Fashion House HR. I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the senior designer position. Can you start Monday?" Adwoa nearly dropped her phone. Yes, I can start Monday. Thank you so much." "Wonderful. You'll be working closely with our senior creative director, Mr. Asante. He specifically requested that you be assigned to his team." After hanging up, Adwoa danced around her small apartment, then immediately called her best friend Adwoa, who still lived in London. "I got the job," she screamed into the phone. "Adwoa, that's amazing. Asante Fashion House, that's huge. You're going to be designing for celebrities and politicians and—" "There's something else," Adwoa interrupted. "Something I haven't told you." "What?" "Kwame works there. He interviewed me." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Kwame? As in your Kwame, the boy you've been crying over for 7 years?" "He's not my Kwame anymore, Adwoa, and I haven't been crying over him. Adwoa, you still have his picture on your bedside table. I've seen your WhatsApp status updates. Every time you post a sunset or a love song, I know you're thinking about him." Adwoa sighed. Adwoa knew her too well. "What are you going to do?" Adwoa asked. "I'm going to be professional. I'm going to do my job. This is the opportunity I've been working toward for 7 years. I'm not going to let the past ruin my future." But as Adwoa got ready for her first day at work, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Kwame had looked at her in that conference room. There had been hurt in his eyes, yes, but also something else. Something that made her heart race, just like it did when they were teenagers. Meanwhile, across town in his office, Kwame was setting up his deception. He called his assistant, Kojo, into his office. "I need you to keep something confidential," he said. "Of course, sir. Always." Meanwhile, across town in his office, Kwame was setting up his deception. He called his assistant, Kojo, into his office. "I need you to keep something confidential," he said. "Of course, sir. Always. Our new senior designer, Adwoa Mensah. For business reasons, I need her to think I'm just the senior creative director, not the CEO. If anyone asks, my name is Asante, and I report to the board." Kojo looked confused but nodded. "Yes, sir. But may I ask why?" Kwame turned to look out his window at the busy streets below. "It's complicated, Kojo. Just trust me on this." What Kwame couldn't explain was that he needed time to understand why Adwoa, had come back into his life. He needed to know if she was the same person who had left him without explanation, or if she had changed. He needed to protect his heart while he figured out if he could trust her again. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to be close to her again, even if it meant living a lie. Monday morning, Adwoa walked into Asante Fashion House as an employee for the first time. She wore a beautiful navy blue fitted dress she had designed herself, professional but distinctly African, modern but respectful of tradition. Her hair was styled in straight shoulder length, and she carried herself with the confidence of a woman who belonged in these halls. "Welcome to the team," Kwame said when she arrived at the design department on the 20th floor. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a white dress shirt, looking more approachable than he had in his suit during the interview. "Thank you, Mr. Asante," she replied formally. "Please, call me E. Everyone does." The design department was a creative wonderland. Huge work tables covered with fabric samples, sketches taped to every wall, mannequins wearing works in progress, and young designers huddled around computers, working on digital designs. The energy was infectious. "Let me show you to your workspace," Kwame said, leading her to a corner area with large windows and excellent natural light. "I thought you'd appreciate the view." From her desk, Adwoa could see the Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park and the busy Independence Square. It was perfect. "Your first project," Kwame continued, handing her a folder, "is designing a capsule collection for our new Heritage Fusion line. We want pieces that appeal to both local and international markets. As Adwoa opened the folder and began reading, Kwame found excuses to linger near her desk. He pretended to review other projects, but really he was just watching her work. The way she bit her bottom lip when she was concentrating. The way she hummed softly to herself when she was in the creative zone. The way she smiled when an idea came to her. It was exactly the way she used to work on her art projects in secondary school. She called out after an hour of sketching. Yes? This budget allocation, it seems quite generous for a new employee's first project. Kwame had deliberately tripled the normal budget, but he couldn't tell her that. The company believes in investing in talent, he said simply. Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable working rhythm. Every morning, Kwame would stop by Adwoa's desk with coffee, always prepared exactly the way she liked it, though he pretended it was just a lucky guess. They would discuss the day's projects, and he would offer suggestions that always seemed to push her creativity in exactly the right direction. When Adwoa struggled with difficult clients who didn't understand her vision, Kwame would mysteriously smooth things over. When she needed expensive materials for her designs, they would somehow appear in her workspace the next morning. When other designers questioned her rapid promotion, Kwame would redirect their attention to her obvious talent. "You're very lucky," her colleague Adwoa said one afternoon. "Asante never takes such personal interest in new employees." "We just work well together," Adwoa replied, but she was beginning to wonder about Asante's unusual attention herself. The truth was, working with Adwoa again was both heaven and torture for Kwame. Heaven because she was brilliant at what she did, because her laugh still made his heart skip beats, because her presence made even the most mundane meetings feel special. Torture because he couldn't touch her, couldn't tell her how he felt, couldn't ask the questions that kept him awake at night. "Why did you leave me? Did you ever love me the way I loved you? Do you think about our past when you look at me?" Not everyone was happy about Adwoa's rapid success at Asante Fashion House. Abena Ose, a senior designer who had been with the company for 5 years, watched with growing resentment as the new girl received project after project. Praise after praise, and unusual attention from the mysterious Asante. "It's not fair," Abena complained to her friend Ya during their lunch break at the company cafeteria. "I've been here 5 years, and I've never gotten the budgets and opportunities they're giving her." "Maybe she's just talented," Ya suggested, picking at her jollof rice. "Talented?" Abena scoffed. "Please, I went to Canoost for fashion design. She went to some unknown school in London." "What makes her so special?" Ya lowered her voice. "People are saying Asante has a thing for her." "Exactly. It's obvious he's playing favorites, and I'm going to prove it." Abena began watching Adwoa closely, looking for any sign of improper behavior, any excuse to file a complaint with HR. She noticed how Asante always seemed to be near Adwoa's workspace, how he brought her coffee every morning, how he stayed late when she was working on projects. "There's definitely something going on," Abena told herself. "And when I figure out what it is, that girl is finished." Meanwhile, other employees were beginning to whisper as well. In a company of over 500 people, gossip traveled fast. "Have you seen how Asante looks at the new designer? They have lunch together every day. She's only been here a month and she's already leading the Heritage Fusion project. I heard he personally requested her for his team." The whispers reached Adwoa's ears, and she began to feel uncomfortable. During one of their coffee meetings, she decided to address it. "People are talking about us," she said quietly. Kwame looked up from his sketches. "What kind of talking?" "They think you're giving me special treatment, that there's something unprofessional going on between us." Kwame's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell her that yes, there was something between them, but it was their shared history, not workplace impropriety. He wanted to tell her that he promoted her because she was brilliant, not because of any current romantic involvement. But he couldn't say any of that without revealing who he really was. "Let them talk," he said instead. "Your work speaks for itself. Anyone who looks at your designs objectively can see why you've been given these opportunities." But Adwoa wasn't satisfied with that answer. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Kwame's heart stopped. "What is it?" "Do I remind you of someone? Sometimes I catch you looking at me like you've seen me before." Kwame stared into her eyes, those same beautiful eyes that had captivated him as a teenager. He wanted so badly to tell her the truth. That yes, she reminded him of someone. That she was someone, the love of his life. The woman who had haunted his dreams for 7 years. "You have one of those faces," he said finally. "Universal. Familiar." It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. That Thursday evening, Mama Akosha called Adwoa while she was working late at the office. "My dear, I hope you haven't forgotten about our dinner this Sunday. I'm so excited for you to meet my son." Adwoa looked around the empty design floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Asante still working at his desk, the warm light from his lamp creating a golden circle around him. "Mrs. Asante, I've been thinking about that dinner." "No excuses, Adwoa. You promised. Besides, I've already told Kwame all about you. He's looking forward to meeting the woman who saved his mother's life." Adwoa's stomach dropped. Kwame was expecting to meet her on Sunday. The same Kwame who had been working alongside her for weeks, pretending to be someone else. "What? What time should I come?" she asked weakly. 7 p.m. and wear something beautiful. First impressions are important." After hanging up, Adwoa sat in her chair, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. This was becoming too complicated. She was supposed to have dinner with Kwame on Sunday, but Kwame didn't know she was the woman coming to dinner. And she didn't know that Asante was actually Kwame Asante, the CEO. This was a disaster waiting to happen. Across the office, Kwame's phone was also ringing. "Kwame, don't forget about dinner on Sunday," his mother said cheerfully. "I want you to come early so we can talk before Adwoa arrives." "Mama, about this dinner. No backing out. This young woman is special, Kwame. She's kind, intelligent, beautiful, and she has this way of making people feel comfortable. I have a feeling you two are going to get along very well." If only she knew, Kwame thought. Sunday came faster than either of them wanted. Mama Akosha spent the entire day preparing. She cooked all of Kwame's favorite dishes: palm nut soup with fish, jollof rice, kelewele, and kontomire stew. She arranged fresh flowers throughout the house and set the dining table with her finest china. At 6 p.m., Kwame arrived at his family's mansion in East Legon. The house was beautiful, a modern interpretation of traditional Ashanti architecture, with high ceilings, carved wooden details, and a large courtyard filled with tropical plants. "You look handsome," his mother said, kissing his cheek. He was wearing a white traditional kaftan with subtle gold embroidery, elegant but not overly formal. "Mama, before this woman arrives, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Kwame took a deep breath. How could he explain that he already knew Adwoa, that they had a history, that he had been working with her for weeks under false pretenses? I don't want you to get your hopes up too high. Sometimes people aren't what they seem." Mama Akosua studied her son's face. "Kwame, what aren't you telling me?" Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. "She's here," Mama Akosua said excitedly, rushing toward the front door. Kwame followed more slowly, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. But when Mama Akosua opened the door, Adwoa wasn't there. "Mrs. Asante, I'm so sorry I'm late," came a voice from the garden. "I was having trouble finding the house number in the dark." They could hear footsteps on the gravel pathway, but the garden was dimly lit, and they couldn't see clearly. Come in, Mama Akosua called out. "Kwame, go help her." Kwame walked toward the garden, but just as he reached the gate, his phone rang with an urgent work emergency. A major client was threatening to cancel a $1 million CD contract unless Kwame personally handled the crisis tonight. "I have to take this," he told his mother apologetically. "Tell Adwoa I'll be right back." He answered the phone and walked to his car to drive back to the office, just as Adwoa was entering through the back garden entrance, wearing an elegant emerald green dress. First near miss. The following Sunday, Mama Akosua tried again. "This time, no work emergencies," she warned Kwame. "Turn off your phone." "Yes, Mama." At exactly 7 p.m., Kwame sat in the living room, nervously adjusting his collar. He was wearing a burgundy traditional agbada this time. He could hear his mother greeting someone at the front door. "Adwoa, my dear, you look beautiful." "Thank you, Mrs. Asante. I brought some flowers from the market." "How thoughtful. Kwame is in the living room. Let me just put these in water, and then I'll introduce you two." Kwame stood up, smoothing his agbada. This was it, finally. But just as footsteps approached the living room, there was a loud crash from the kitchen. "Oh no!" Mama Akosua cried out. "The soup pot!" "Let me help you," Adwoa said immediately. For the next 20 minutes, they cleaned up the spilled palm nut soup while Kwame waited in the living room. When he finally went to check on them, he found his mother insisting that Adwoa sit down while she prepared a simple replacement meal. "You've helped enough, my dear. Kwame, take Adwoa to the garden while I finish cooking." But just as they were walking toward the back door, Adwoa's phone rang. "I'm so sorry," she said to Kwame without really looking at him clearly in the dim hallway. "This is my mother calling from London. She's not well, and I need to take this." She stepped into the bathroom to take the call in private. 20 minutes later, when she emerged, Mama Akosua informed them that Kwame had received an urgent call and had to leave for a family emergency. Second near miss. By the third Sunday, both Kwame and Adwoa were beginning to think fate was conspiring against this meeting. This time, everything seemed to go perfectly. Kwame arrived early wearing a classic white suit. Adwoa arrived on time in a stunning purple dress. No work emergencies, no phone calls, no kitchen disasters. They were finally in the same room, both walking toward the living room, when suddenly the lights went out. ECG, Mama Akosua sighed, referring to the electricity company of Ghana's frequent power outages. "The transformer in our area has been acting up all week." In the darkness, Kwame and Adwoa actually passed each other in the hallway, but neither could see the other clearly. "Let me find some candles," Mama Akosua said. "I should probably go," Adwoa said. "It's dangerous driving in the dark when the streetlights are out too." "No, wait," Kwame started to say, but she was already gathering her purse. "Tell your son I'm sorry we missed each other again," Adwoa said to Mama Akosua. "Maybe next time." Third near miss. After Adwoa left, Kwame sat in the dark living room, shaking his head in disbelief. "Mama," he said when she returned with candles, "I think the universe is trying to tell us something." "Nonsense," she replied firmly. "Next Sunday, I'm locking both of you in the same room until you have a proper conversation." Back at the office, Abena's jealousy was reaching a boiling point. She had been watching Adwoa for weeks, documenting every interaction with Asante, every special privilege, every sign of favoritism. "This ends now," she muttered to herself as she formulated a plan. Adwoa had been working on a revolutionary design, a wedding dress that incorporated traditional kente patterns into a modern silhouette. It was stunning, innovative, and exactly the kind of piece that would establish her reputation in the industry. One evening, after everyone had gone home, Abena used her keycard to access the design floor. She went straight to Adwoa's computer and copied all the files for the wedding dress design onto her flash drive. The next morning, Abena called in sick, then spent the day making small modifications to Adwoa's design, changing colors, adjusting proportions, adding her own styling elements. By evening, she had created what looked like an original design inspired by Adwoa's work. The following week, Abena presented her design to a major client, Mrs. Akoto, a wealthy businesswoman planning her daughter's society wedding. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," Mrs. Akoto said enthusiastically. "Traditional but contemporary, elegant but distinctly Ghanaian. We'll take it." Abena signed the contract and collected a substantial commission. But 2 days later, Adwoa presented her original design to the same client during a follow-up meeting that Asante had arranged. Mrs. Akoto was furious. "What kind of company is this?" she shouted. "Two designers are trying to sell me the same dress. This is completely unprofessional." The scandal quickly reached the highest levels of the company. An emergency meeting was called, and Adwoa found herself facing a panel of senior executives, including some she had never seen before. "Miss Mensah," the HR director said sternly, "these are very serious allegations. Industrial espionage, theft of intellectual property, breach of client confidentiality. These charges could result in immediate termination and legal action." "I don't understand," Adwoa said, her voice shaking. "That design is mine. I've been working on it for 3 weeks. I have all my sketches, my process notes, my fabric samples." "Miss Osi also has sketches and notes," the HR director replied, and she presented her version to the client first. But that's impossible. I never showed my design to anyone except... Adwoa stopped. Except Asante. He was the only person who had seen her complete design portfolio. Except who? The HR director pressed. Adwoa looked around the room desperately. Where was Asante? Why wasn't he here to defend her? Surely he would tell them that she was the original designer. I want to speak with Asante, she said. He can verify that this is my work. The executives looked at each other strangely. Miss Mensah, one of them said slowly, there is no Asante on our senior staff. Adwoa's world tilted. What do you mean? He's the senior creative director. He's been my supervisor for weeks. Our senior creative director is Mr. Kofi Mensah. Perhaps you're confused about names. No, Adwoa said firmly. Asante, tall, dark skin, maybe 28 years old. He wears expensive suits, drives a black BMW. His office is on the 25th floor. The executives exchanged glances again. Miss Mensah, the HR director said gently, the 25th floor is executive level. Only board members and the CEO have offices there. The room was spinning now. Adwoa gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. The CEO, she whispered. What's the CEO's name? Kwame Asante, the HR director replied, but he's been traveling internationally for the past month. He's not even in the country. That was a lie that Kwame's assistant had been instructed to maintain, but Adwoa didn't know that. I need some air, Adwoa said, standing up unsteadily. Miss Mensah, this meeting isn't over. We need to... But Adwoa was already walking toward the door. She needed to find Asante. She needed answers. She needed to understand what was happening to her life. As she stumbled out of the conference room, her mind was reeling with questions. Who was the man she had been working with for weeks? Why had he lied about his identity? And why did he have access to executive floors if he was just a creative director? Most importantly, why did she feel like her heart was breaking all over again? Adwoa didn't go back to her desk. Instead, she went straight to the elevator and pressed the button for the 25th floor. She was going to find Asante and demand answers, even if it meant marching into the CEO's office. The elevator doors opened to reveal a luxurious executive floor with marble floors, mahogany paneling, and oil paintings of African landscapes. There was only one office at the end of the hall, with double doors and a brass nameplate that read, Kwame Asante, Chief Executive Officer. Adwoa's steps slowed as she approached the office. Through the glass walls, she could see a familiar figure sitting behind an enormous desk, talking on the phone. It was Asante, but according to the nameplate, this was Kwame Asante's office. Her heart pounded as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Asante, Kwame Asante. The same office, the same man. She pushed open the office doors without knocking. Kwame looked up from his phone call and his face went pale. I'll call you back, he said quickly, hanging up. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the vast office. The same office where Adwoa had been accused of industrial espionage just an hour ago. The same office where the CEO was supposed to be traveling internationally. You lied to me, Adwoa said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adwoa, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been pretending to be someone else for weeks? Can you explain why you let me think you were just a creative director while you're actually the CEO? Can you explain why you let me walk into that disciplinary meeting without defending me? Tears were streaming down her face now, and Kwame wanted desperately to go to her, to hold her, to wipe away her tears like he used to do when they were young. I was trying to protect you, he said. Protect me? From what? From me. From my feelings. From the past. Adwoa laughed bitterly. The past? Kwame, I left you 7 years ago. The past is exactly what I was trying to escape from. Then why did you come back? The question burst out of him with all the pain and confusion he had been carrying for weeks. I came back because this is my home, because I had a job opportunity, because I thought enough time had passed that I could build a life here without... Without what? Without running into my ex-boyfriend and having my heart broken all over again. The words hung in the air between them. Finally, the truth was out. Your heart broken? Kwame stepped around his desk. You broke my heart, Amma. You left me without a word, without an explanation. One day we were planning our future together, and the next day you were gone. I had to leave. Why? Why did you have to leave? What was so terrible that you couldn't even say goodbye? Adwoa took a shaky breath. She had kept this secret for 7 years, but standing in this office, looking at the man she had never stopped loving, she couldn't keep it anymore. Your father, she whispered. Kwame's face changed. My father? What does my father have to do with this? The night before graduation, he came to see me. He told me that you had a bright future ahead of you, that you were going to inherit the family business, that you needed to marry someone from a good family, someone who could help the business grow. Kwame's hands clenched into fists. What exactly did he say to you? He said I was just a poor girl from Nima who would hold you back. He offered to pay for my education abroad if I would leave Ghana and never contact you again. And you took the money. It wasn't a question. Kwame's voice was flat, emotionless. I was 18 years old, Kwame. I was scared. I thought if I really loved you, I should let you go. I should let you have the life your family wanted for you. So you decided what was best for me without even asking me what I wanted. I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing? Kwame's voice rose. The right thing would have been to tell me what my father said. The right thing would have been to let me make my own choice. The right thing would have been to trust that I loved you enough to fight for us. Adwoa was sobbing now. I was young and stupid and scared. I made a mistake. But I thought you would be better off without me. Better off? Kwame laughed bitterly. I spent the next 7 years thinking you didn't love me, thinking I wasn't good enough for you, thinking I was a fool for believing we had something real. We did have something real, did we? Because real love doesn't run away at the first sign of trouble. Real love fights. Real love trusts. The words hit Adwoa like physical blows. You're right, she whispered. I was a coward. I was young and scared, and I made the worst decision of my life. But I did love you, Kwame. I never stopped loving you. Kwame stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet, controlled. It's too late for this conversation, Adwoa. 7 years too late. Is it? Because for the past few weeks, working with you, I thought maybe we could… What? Start over? Pretend the past didn't happen? Kwame shook his head. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. And neither are you. No, we're not. We're older, wiser. We could do better this time. There is no this time, Adwoa. There's no us. There's just 2 people who used to know each other trying to work in the same company. His words were like ice, but Adwoa could see the pain in his eyes, the same pain she had been carrying for 7 years. What about my job? She asked quietly. Your job is safe, you're talented, and the company needs people like you. But I think it's best if you transfer to a different department. Work with someone else. And the accusations? The stolen design? I'll handle it. Abena will be terminated, and your reputation will be cleared. Just like that. Just like that. Adwoa nodded slowly. She understood. He was protecting her again, just like he always had. But this time, there would be no personal relationship, just professional courtesy. I should go, she said. Yes, you should. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Kwame, I'm sorry. For everything. Kwame didn't respond. He just watched her walk away, just like she had 7 years ago. But this time, he knew why. That evening, Mama Akoso was in her kitchen preparing for what she had decided would be the final attempt at introducing her son to Adwoa. She had made all of Kwame's favorite foods and even bought new flowers for the dining room table. When Kwame arrived at 6 p.m., she immediately noticed something was wrong. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped, and he moved like a man carrying a heavy burden. What's wrong, my son? She asked, setting down her wooden spoon. Nothing, Mama. Just a difficult day at work. Is this about the dinner? Are you nervous about meeting Adwoa? Kwame almost laughed. If only she knew. Mama, there's something I need to tell you about tonight's dinner. What is it? Before Kwame could answer, the doorbell rang. She's here, Mama Akoso said, wiping her hands on her apron. Come with me to greet her. Mama, wait. But she was already walking toward the front door. Kwame followed reluctantly, his heart pounding. This time, there were no work emergencies, no kitchen disasters, no power outages. This time, Adwoa walked through the front door and came face to face with the man she had been working with for weeks. "You," she breathed. "You know each other?" Mama Akosua asked, looking between them in confusion. Neither Adwoa nor Kwame answered. They were staring at each other with a mixture of shock, pain, and something else that Mama Akosua couldn't quite identify. "Wait," Mama Akosua said slowly, her mind working. "Adwoa, you said your full name was Adwoa Mensah, but you look familiar. Very familiar." She studied Adwoa's face more carefully, and suddenly her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're not Adwoa Mensah. You're Ama Osei." "Yes." "You're the girl who broke my son's heart 7 years ago." "Yes." "You're the girl I used to think of as a daughter." "Yes." Mama Akosua looked at her son, then back at Adwoa, and suddenly everything made sense. The familiarity she had felt in the hospital. The way Adwoa had seemed to understand her so well. The reason her son had been so reluctant to meet the woman who saved her life. "You saved my life," she said to Adwoa. "I couldn't let you die. Even though you thought I might hate you for what you did to my son." Adwoa nodded, tears flowing freely. "I know you have every right to hate me, Mrs. Asante. I know what I did was unforgivable." Mama Akosua was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. Then she turned to her son. "Kwame, did you know it was her when she saved my life?" "No, Mama. I found out later." "And you didn't tell me?" I didn't know how." Mama Akosua looked between them again, seeing the pain and love and regret written on both their faces. "Sit down," she said firmly, "both of you. We're going to talk about this properly." "Mama, I don't think—" "Sit down." They sat at opposite ends of the living room sofa, as far apart as possible, while still being in the same piece of furniture. "Now," Mama Akosha said, taking a seat in her favorite armchair, "I want to know exactly what happened 7 years ago, and I want the truth from both of you." For the next hour, the story came out. Adwoa's version of events, Kwame's pain and confusion, the role that Papa Kwaku Asante had played in their separation. When Adwoa finished explaining about the ultimatum and the money, Mama Akosua's face was dark with anger. "That foolish man," she muttered. "I always suspected he had something to do with your disappearance, but I could never prove it." "You knew?" Kwame asked. "I suspected. Your father was very old-fashioned about marriage and social class. He wanted you to marry within your economic level, someone who could bring business connections to the family. But you never said anything." "What could I say? I had no proof. And you were so heartbroken I didn't want to make it worse by suggesting your father had interfered." Mama Akosua turned to Adwoa. "My dear, what my late husband did was wrong. Very wrong. But what you did was also wrong." "I know. You should have told Kwame about the ultimatum. You should have let him make his own choice. I know that now, but I was 18 and I was scared. I thought I was protecting him." "You were protecting yourself," Mama Akosua said gently, "from the possibility of not being good enough, from the fear of holding him back. But love isn't about protection, Ama. Love is about trust." Both Kwame and Adwoa were crying now, 7 years of pain and misunderstanding finally being released. "I'm sorry," Adwoa whispered to Kwame. "I'm so sorry for hurting you." "I'm sorry too," Kwame replied, "for being angry for so long, for not trying to find you, for not fighting harder for us." Mama Akosa watched her son and the woman she had once hoped would become her daughter-in-law. She could see that they still loved each other deeply, but she could also see how much damage had been done. "The question now," she said softly, "is whether you can forgive each other, and whether you can learn to trust again." The three of them sat in the living room for a long time, talking through years of hurt and misunderstanding. As the evening wore on, some of the tension began to ease. "I need to know something," Kwame said to Adwoa. "When you came back to Ghana, when you applied for the job at my company, did you know it was mine?" "No," Adwoa said honestly. "I knew the company name was Asante Fashion House, but Asante is such a common name in Ghana. I never imagined it could be your family's business. And when you saw me in the interview, I was shocked. But I needed the job, and I thought maybe we could work together professionally. I thought maybe enough time had passed. And when I pretended to be Asante instead of the CEO, Adwoa was quiet for a moment. I was confused, hurt. I didn't understand why you were hiding who you were. I was protecting myself, Kwame admitted. I wanted to be close to you again, but I was afraid of getting hurt. So we were both protecting ourselves instead of being honest. Yes. Mama Akosua stood up. I'm going to check on dinner, she said tactfully, giving them some privacy. When she left the room, Kwame and Adwoa found themselves alone together for the first time since the confrontation in his office. Ama, Kwame said softly, using her real name for the first time in weeks. Yes? I want you to know that even though I was angry, even though I felt betrayed, working with you these past few weeks it's been the happiest I've been in 7 years. Fresh tears sprang to her eyes. Really? Really, you're even more talented than you were in school. You're confident, independent, successful. You've become everything I always knew you could be. But I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can open my heart to someone who might leave me again when things get difficult. Adwoa nodded. She understood. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. What if I promise not to leave? She asked quietly. You promised that before. I was a child before. I'm a woman now. People change, Ama. People grow, but some wounds run too deep. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their thoughts. Finally, Adwoa spoke. What if we started over? Not as the people we were 7 years ago, but as the people we are now. What if we got to know each other again, slowly, carefully? As friends? As whatever we choose to be. No pressure, no expectations. Just honesty. Kwame considered this. You would stay in Ghana. You wouldn't run away again. I'm not running anywhere. This is my home. This is where I want to build my life. And if things don't work out between us romantically, if we discover that too much has changed, then we'll be friends, good friends who respect each other and share a history. Kwame looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand. Okay, he said. Let's try. Mama Akosua returned to the living room carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. When she saw them holding hands, she smiled. Good, she said, setting down the tray. Now let's have dinner, and this time no interruptions, no emergencies, and no power outages. Just family. Family? Adwoa questioned. My dear, Mama Akosua said, settling into her chair, you saved my life. You showed kindness to a stranger. You've brought light back into my son's eyes for the first time in 7 years. As far as I'm concerned, you're already family. 6 months later, Asante Fashion House launched their most successful collection ever. The Heritage Fusion line, designed collaboratively by Kwame and Adwoa, was featured in fashion magazines across Africa and Europe. Orders poured in from celebrities, politicians, and everyday women who wanted to celebrate their African heritage while looking modern and sophisticated. Adwoa had been promoted to head of creative design, working directly with Kwame in his real capacity as CEO. Their professional partnership was seamless. He handled the business side while she focused on design, but they collaborated on every major decision. Their personal relationship had developed more slowly. They had dinner together every Friday at Mama Akosua's house. They attended cultural events and art exhibitions around Accra. They took long walks on the beach at Labadi, talking about everything and nothing. They were learning to trust again, one day at a time. On a warm Saturday evening, Kwame picked Adwoa up from her new apartment in Airport residential area. She had moved out of her small room in Nima and into a beautiful 2-bedroom flat with a view of the city. Where are we going? She asked as they drove through the busy streets of Accra. It's a surprise, he said, but he was heading toward a familiar direction. When they arrived at the University of Ghana campus in Legon, Adwoa looked at him questioningly. Our old school, she said. I thought we should visit the place where it all began. They walked hand in hand through the campus, past the lecture halls where they had attended classes, past the library where they had studied together, past the spot where they had shared their first kiss under a large mahogany tree. Do you remember, Kwame said as they sat on a bench overlooking the campus, when we used to plan our future together? You were going to be a successful businessman, and I was going to be a famous designer. And we were going to change the world. Well, Adwoa said, leaning against his shoulder, we did become successful, and our designs are making African fashion more visible globally. Maybe we are changing the world, just a little bit. Maybe we are. As the sun set over the campus, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Kwame turned to face Adwoa. "Ama, I have something to ask you." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" "I know we said we would take things slowly. I know we agreed to rebuild trust gradually. But I need you to know something." "What?" "I never stopped loving you, even when I was angry, even when I thought I hated you, I never stopped loving you." Tears filled her eyes. "I never stopped loving you either. I want to ask you to marry me," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Not because my mother wants grandchildren, not because it makes business sense, but because I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else." The ring was beautiful, a classic solitaire diamond set in gold, simple but elegant. "But I also want you to know," he continued, "that if you're not ready, if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need." Adwoa looked at the ring, then at Kwame's face, then at the campus where their love story had begun. "I don't need more time," she said softly. "I've been ready for 7 years. I've been ready since the day I left. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." As Kwame slipped the ring onto her finger, Adwoa thought about the journey that had brought them back to each other. The mistakes, the pain, the years of separation, and finally the chance to begin again. "You know," she said as they walked back to the car, "if someone told me a year ago that I would be engaged to Kwame Asante, I would have thought they were crazy. And if someone told me that the woman who saved my mother's life would turn out to be my first love, I would have said it was impossible. But here we are. Here we are." 1 year later, the gardens of the Asante family mansion were transformed into a wonderland of white and gold decorations. Traditional kente cloth was draped elegantly around the trees, and fresh flowers from the local markets filled every corner of the space. The wedding was a perfect blend of traditional and modern, just like Adwoa's designs. The ceremony began with traditional Akan rituals, with both families participating in the customary gift exchanges and blessings. Adwoa wore a dress of her own design, a stunning creation that incorporated hand-woven kente patterns into a contemporary silhouette. The bodice was fitted with intricate beadwork, and the flowing skirt moved like liquid gold as she walked. Kwame wore a matching white suit with kente accents, designed by his new wife to complement her dress perfectly. As they exchanged vows under the same mahogany tree where they had shared their first kiss as teenagers, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. 7 years ago," Kwame said, holding Adwoa's hands, "I thought I had lost you forever. I thought our story was over. But I've learned that some love stories don't end. They just pause, waiting for the right moment to begin again." "I promise you," Adwoa replied, her voice strong and clear, "that I will never run away again. Not from challenges, not from difficulties, not from love. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Mama Akosha watched from the front row, tears of joy streaming down her face. She had waited 7 years to see her son truly happy again, and it was worth every moment of the wait. As the couple kissed to seal their marriage, the wedding guests erupted in cheers and traditional ululations. Drummers began playing high-life music, and soon everyone was dancing in celebration. During the reception, as Kwame and Adwoa swayed together on the dance floor, she whispered in his ear, "Do you think we would have made it if we had stayed together 7 years ago?" "No," he answered honestly. "We were too young. We hadn't experienced enough of life to appreciate what we had. So maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. Maybe it did. Even the pain. Even the pain. Because it taught us how precious this is." As the evening continued, guests shared stories, offered blessings, and celebrated the union of two souls who had found their way back to each other against all odds. The last dance of the evening was a slow song that the DJ dedicated to the couple, Derby by Kwabena, a beautiful Ghanaian love song about eternal devotion. As they danced alone on the floor, surrounded by the warm glow of string lights and the love of their family and friends, Adwoa realized that this moment was worth every tear she had cried, every lonely night she had endured, every moment of doubt she had experienced. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means holding on. But true love means finding your way back to each other, no matter how long the journey takes. 2 years after their wedding, Kwame and Adwoa stood in their new flagship store in Johannesburg, South Africa. Asante Fashion House had expanded across the continent, bringing modern African fashion to markets from Lagos to Nairobi to Johannesburg. Their success wasn't just professional, it was personal. They had learned to communicate openly, to trust completely, and to support each other's dreams while building new ones together. Adwoa was pregnant with their first child, and Mama Akosua was already planning to spoil her grandchild terribly. "You know what I've learned," Adwoa said as they watched customers trying on their latest designs. "What's that?" "Kindness creates connections we never expect. If I hadn't helped your mother that day, we might never have found our way back to each other." Exactly. One act of kindness changed everything. Kwame pulled his wife close, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "And what else have you learned?" "That love doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like letting go. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Sometimes it looks like forgiving. And sometimes it looks like starting over. And sometimes," Kwame added, "it looks like a second chance." As they stood together in their store, surrounded by the beautiful clothes they had created together, watching happy customers celebrate their heritage through fashion, they knew they had built something special. Not just a business, but a legacy. Their love story had become part of their brand's DNA, a reminder that authentic beauty comes from staying true to who you are, that success means nothing without someone to share it with, and that the best love stories are the ones that survive being broken and choose to rebuild themselves stronger. This story reminds us that life rarely follows the path we plan for it. Sometimes the detours that seem like disasters are actually leading us exactly where we need to be. Adwoa thought she was protecting Kwame by leaving him. Kwame thought he was protecting himself by hiding his identity. But both learned that real protection comes from truth, vulnerability, and the courage to love despite the risk of being hurt. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we love most. Sometimes the biggest act of love looks like the biggest betrayal. Sometimes we have to lose everything to realize what really matters. But most importantly, this story teaches us that kindness is never wasted. A simple act of compassion, helping a stranger in need, can set in motion a chain of events that changes multiple lives forever. Never underestimate the power of doing good, even when no one is watching. Because someone always is watching. And sometimes that someone is destiny itself, weaving together the threads of our lives in ways we could never imagine. Love doesn't always get it right the first time. But real love, true love, finds a way to come back. It finds a way to heal. It finds a way to begin again. And that kind of love is always worth waiting for.